The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is considered by many to be the greatest video game ever made, but today I'm going to be asking the question, is it the greatest place you could ever live? No, it's a medieval kingdom. This place sucks. This guy dies at like age 35 and that's considered a long life there. And I'm pretty sure half the people you ever see in this game are dead by the end of it. But if we had to live there, how long could we last? Now, if we looked at the whole kingdom at once, the sheer amount of options available to us makes survival trivial. Here's unlimited water. You can buy fish in this shop from the money you get from mowing the grass in Hyrule Field. And here's an abandoned home we can squat in rent-free. Bam, food, water, shelter. Easy. But most people can't walk across the country they live in every day. And more importantly, if that's all the consideration we gave it, this video would be really boring. So for this survival challenge, I'm going to be taking things a step further and ranking every area in Hyrule, not only based on how survivable they are if you were to be dropped in there with just the clothes on your back, but also based on whether you'd actually want to live in them. And we're going to be ranking them independently from each other as well, meaning that if you're starving to death on this volcano while there's food 20 feet down the road in Kakariko Village, we're not allowed to leave to go get it. Because if we were to leave, we would face a fate even worse than death, losing an arbitrary YouTube gaming challenge. And frankly, online clout is worth dying for. But how are we going to be determining what counts as a singular area in this world where everything just kind of runs together? At first, I thought I would just use every area that has its own title screen, but check out this one. This is just the inside of a windmill, a single building with a single dude playing this single song on loop non-stop all day. The only reason it's important enough to even get its own title is because it's where you learn the Song of Storms, a song that exists for the sole purpose of fucking up the very same windmill you learn it in. And if that pisses him off so much, why does he keep playing it? The logic for which areas get titles and which don't is entirely arbitrary, so instead, we're going to be going off of geographical and socio-political regions. For example, the Lost Woods, Temple Sanctuary, and Kokiri Forest will all be grouped together under just the title Lost Woods. Because first off, that's just the name of the whole forest, and more importantly, because they have a very hard and clear defined border right here, and are populated throughout by the same little brats who keep trying to get in my way while I'm trying to save their stupid worthless lives. I will also be including all the dungeons as their own areas, not because it makes sense to do so, but instead because you spend 3/4 of the game in them, and most importantly, because I thought it would be fun. And if you're coming to a YouTube channel run by a paper fish for anything else other than that really says more about you than it does me. Now, let's get started with the first of a shockingly high number of warring experiences in Ocarina of Time, the Great Deku Tree. I've heard it said that it is every parent's dream to outlive their child, but unfortunately for the Great Deku Tree, his time on Earth is running out. So in a final desperate bid, he summons his adoptive son Link and consumes the child in order to try to take him down with him. I may have fudged some of the story motives there, but regardless, that is an accurate description of the physical events occurring. Now, in order to survive inside here, we're going to need food, water, and some sort of safety from all these monsters while we're sleeping. You may look at them and see nothing more than a threat to our survival, but I assure you, what you're actually looking at here is our food supply. But the biggest and juiciest monsters are at the very top of the tree, and if we want to go get them, we have a problem we have to deal with first. In order to get up there, you need to climb these vines that are covered in skulltulas that will viciously attack us as we climb up. The solution to this problem is, of course, the exact same solution for every problem in a video game, being murder. If you climb up these vines to the middle of the tree, we can find a slingshot in this unlocked chest. These little skulltulas are as good as dead, and we can finally get access to a few of these big boys. Now, normally, a 6-foot-tall skull spider would rightfully inspire fear in most people. These guys, though, just kind of hang there, exposing themselves to us. I don't even think it's like a trick or anything either. Link can totally just smack them in the back and kill them if he times it right. Like, they can spin around and hit you, and like that knocks Link over and it hurts him a bit, but like a human can do that too by just kind of sticking out their arms and spinning around in circles, so it's not exactly an impressive display of strength or anything. Hell, and as long as we have the slingshot, we don't even have to get near him. We can just shoot him. Don't even have to beat him to death with our bare hands like I was originally planning. The only question we have to ask about this guy is, are these monsters actually safe to eat? And in Ocarina of Time, there's no answer to this edibility question at all, really. Link at no point even tries to eat these guys for some reason. Fortunately for us, however, there are other games in the Zelda franchise where Link will try to eat anything not bolted onto the fucking floor. In Breath of the Wild, upon killing an enemy, Link will begin to harvest their various viscera and innards for later use. One of these uses, of course, being the preparation of the worst goddamn meals you've ever seen in your life. However, he does indeed gain nourishment from eating these dubious gibbons. Now, most of the enemies in Ocarina of Time aren't in Breath of the Wild, so we can't test the meat of Skulltulas or Deku Babas directly. But Link can literally eat any kind of monster part in Breath of the Wild as long as it doesn't explode. Miscellaneous guts, Lizalfo's tails, hell, he can even eat horns. Do you know what horns are made out of? They're made out of keratin. That's the same substance that your hair and nails are made from. And if Link can gain nutritional value from what is essentially a giant toenail, I think it's fair to assume that plants and spider meats are at least equally, if not more viable of a meal option. Now, how much spider meat do we have in this tree? Well, if you kill one of these guys, walk away for 30 seconds and come back, we'll actually find there's a brand new spider in its place. And this replacement will happen no matter how many times you kill these Skulltula. So, according to the game, we have an infinite amount of spider meat for us to eat here. Now, you might argue that the enemies respawning is just a quirk of video game design, and we shouldn't really consider it a canon occurrence in the game. But the thing is, in Ocarina of Time, not only are there plenty of enemies that despawn permanently once killed, but a lot of things in this game will literally just respawn in front of you. There's even an animation for it sometimes. Someone had to sit down and design this animation. So I think it's fair to say that the enemy respawns in this game are a fully intended part of the world building, and more importantly, I can keep eating them until they stop, which they never will. So, we have infinite food, but we can't live off that alone. Without water, we'll be dead within 72 hours from dehydration, which brings us to why I actually wanted to come up here in the first place. See, there's water at the bottom of this pit that's covered by webs at the entrance, but even with a sword, Link cannot cut through them and make the descent. The only way to go down there is to climb to the highest point in this tree, jump off, and use our momentum for the fall in order to snap the spider webs closing the way. Now, I do have some concerns about jumping 40 or 50 feet into a shallow pool of water, but Link can do it just fine, and he's just a normal kid. And the spider webs do seem to actually catch him and slow his descent a fair bit before snapping. So I'm just gonna kinda hand wave it away. If you don't like that, I mean, there's wood everywhere. Just rub a couple of sticks together until you get a fire and burn it all away. Now, if you know anything about living organisms, you'll know that this massive gaping hole inside of the Deku tree where his tree bits should be is, not healthy. And not only does the Great Deku Tree die because of this, but when we visit him 7 years later, his mouth has involuntarily closed, sealing his body from the outside world entirely, meaning that in some point in the next 7 years, we're going to become stuck here permanently. I mean, under the rules of how I was ranking the survivability here, it doesn't really make any difference to us. But if all of the holes in the tree are shriveling shut, that does mean we're not going to be getting any more water. This is all we have. So, how long is this gonna last us? Now, we're gonna need to figure out how much water there is first. And the only thing we really have to measure this body of water with is Link himself. So just how tall is this stupid little dipshit? If you head to Lake Hylia, this old man is running some bizarre diving challenge, and the pool he's running it out of actually has a 9-meter long ruler that's marked out every 10 centimeters. Now, as a child, Link can't really stand up straight underwater, but adult Link can give himself a pair of lead boots, sink to the bottom of the pool, and stand there while we take the measurement. And as you can see here, adult Link is almost exactly 150 centimeters tall, or 4'11". The legendary hero of Hyrule is 4'11", with shoes on. For a bit of perspective, world-renowned short stack Super Mario has an official height of 5'1". Link is 2 inches shorter than this guy. Like, I always knew Link wasn't tall, but goddamn, somehow, every time Miyamoto makes a video game character, they keep getting shorter. But we need to know how tall Link is as a child before we can use him as a ruler. So I'm putting him up against the brick wall and counting the literal pixels from the floor to the top of his head. Then, doing the same with adult Link, we can compare the pixel ratios between the two and estimate that child Link is about 3'5" or 104 centimeters tall. And now that we know how tall Link is as both a little child and a slightly less little adult, we can determine just how big anything is in Hyrule just by getting a picture of Link standing next to it. Now, this pool was not easy to measure. There's a lot of angles along the edges, as well as 3 different water elevations I had to take account of. I basically just ended up splitting up the pool into like 30 or 40 different triangles and rectangles and just kind of measured them all out separately. This took me 2 full days to do, and I do not mean 2 calendar days. I mean like 48 actual hours of work. Like all I did for a fucking week was I just came home from work and started copy pasting images of Link all over the place to figure out how big this stupid pool of water is. But it was worth every second, because I now know that this pool of water has approximately 78,708,411 cubic centimeters, 20,792 gallons, or at a gallon per day, 56.96 years worth of water in it, which, depending on how old you are, might be enough to last the rest of your life. Although I suppose that same statement could be true no matter how much water we had in there. But try not to think about it too much. Now, if we wanted enough for a real lifetime supply, like a full 80 years or so worth, there is water deeper in the dungeon. In order to access it, you first need to burn away these webs, not a huge problem, and then shoot this eyeball with a slingshot in order to open this door. Again, very easy for us to do. But before you do that, there's this Deku scrub you gotta take care of. And he cannot be shot with a slingshot. You gotta bounce a seed off of a shield back at him. And we do not have a shield, so this pool of water appears to be inaccessible to us. You know, unless, of course, I didn't think of this before I started editing. We could shoot the eye while dodging the Deku scrub seeds. Wait, hold on. Can you actually do that? Great. Okay, well, this second pool of water is much larger and has a much easier shape to measure out. It's just kind of a big rectangle. Took me 20 minutes. Great. Just great. And this one has 303,713,280 cubic centimeters of water, which works out to 80,232 gallons or 219 years of water at a gallon per day. Cool, cool, cool. So glad we have everything we need to live the rest of our lives out. Just one room over from the one I spent the last weekend. That's cool. And we can even sleep in here since there's no monsters on this side of the room. Not a great life, but technically we now have everything we need to live. Although there is one final issue that we need to consider first. That being, we are trapped inside and have no direct exposure to sunlight. As someone who runs a YouTube gaming channel, this is already how I live my real life. But importantly, I also love dairy. In the United States, all dairy products are spiked with a vitamin D, an essential nutrient that humans typically need direct exposure to sunlight in order to generate. Without it, your bones will slowly decay and you will eventually die. Our long-term survival is going to be based entirely upon the nutritional makeup of Skulltula and Deku Baba meat. So we may just develop scurvy or rickets or some other 18th century disease and drop dead in 2 years, but alternatively, these animals may also just have the perfect blend of nutrients we need in order to live an even healthier life than we did before. No one really knows. I'm just gonna assume things are gonna work out for us, honestly. You may think that's a stupid assumption, so I have an experiment you can run at home to see if my method is flawed. Go boot up Breath of the Wild, collect a lifetime supply of monster parts, and go sit in a cave for the next 60 years to see if Link dies of a vitamin deficiency. I'll be back in 2085 to see your results in the comment section. But for now, I'm fucking done with this place. Let's go get some fresh air in the Lost Woods, where we'll be spawning in the exact same place Link does in this JPEG that he calls a house. Moving outside, we immediately meet Saria, our only friend, and first dinner. I'm joking, of course. I mean, I could easily take out a child in a fight, but they're probably gonna yell at something and attract the attention of all the others in the process. And what I cannot take out in a fight is 20 children, so we're going to have to look elsewhere for food. Now, despite the name, the Kokiri Forest is actually defined by the part of the Lost Woods that has no trees in it. Well, I mean, I guess it has one tree. The Kokiri Forest has no trees in it. What we do have, however, is a fresh water source pouring in from the forest, along with plenty of shelter. I mean, there's already kids living in most of these houses, but like, you know, Link leaves the forest forever at the start of the game. And if we're spawning here at the same time, that just means there's a newly opened up room for us. Life inside this pre-rendered JPEG may not be pretty, but we're not in a position to really be all that picky. All we really need now is a regular food source, and we'll be living pretty comfortably. If we head into the Lost Woods and start ripping up the grass like a deranged lunatic, there's actually a few good sources of these little blue bugs. And the grass is constantly regrowing, with the bugs continuously respawning within it. I'm not really sure where most of them come from, but most bugs are not only edible, but actually a fantastic source of protein. The only real downside of eating the bugs, of course, being they are icky, and I don't wanna. It's gonna be hard to mark this place down as survivable when the food here makes me wanna fucking kill myself. So these are just a last resort for us, because we have even better options available, which, I mean, I suppose any options better than the bugs, but you get what I mean. Traveling from the main village towards the Great Echo Tree, we will run into, first this dipshit who normally won't let you pass unless you have a sword or shield, but using the power of being twice his size, this obstacle is easily overcome, allowing us to find these 3 fuck-ass flowers. And yet, you can't really see it in this game because the N64 can only really render like 7 polygons at a time, but these things got the fattest fucking lickers you've ever seen in your goddamn life. In case you've never had a mouth before, tongues are large masses of muscle, rich in essential proteins and perfect meals for hungry survivors like us. All we have to do is harvest it, and I'm pretty sure I can kill a fucking flower. But if you either think that these hands somehow aren't man enough for the job, or just want some kind of protection in general, the Kokiri Forest has got you covered. All we have to do is crawl through this hole to get the Kokiri sword. Technically, according to the game logic, adult Link, despite being the size of a child himself, is still too large to fit in this hole, meaning that by extension, we cannot fit in this hole either. But look at that thing. That hole is fucking massive. Adult Link can fit in there. He's simply choosing not to for some stupid reason. I guess someone wore their white adventure pants out today and is afraid to get them dirty. A dainty little bitch out here, aren't we, Link? And since the money in this kingdom just kinda grows in the grass, it's pretty easy to get some quickly and buy ourselves a tiny ass wooden shield if we want that as well. But honestly, if you're so goddamn smooth-brained that you need extra protection to keep yourself safe from plant, I would spend less time worrying about how to protect yourself from this slowly rotating stick and start considering how to better protect yourself from your own incompetence. That being said, once we kill and consume the Deku Babas, you would expect we would need to look somewhere else for food, but a new Deku Baba will just regrow in its place in less than a minute, which is great for us because, I mean, I really don't wanna. And with this easy access to food, water, and shelter, we can easily list the Lost Woods as a place where not only could you theoretically survive indefinitely, but with some proper housing, it's about as comfortable as you can expect to get in Hyrule. Not looking forward to having to deal with 20 children who barely tolerate me for the rest of my life, but if a kindergarten teacher can do it, so can I. I actually did have a teacher once who, after teaching us for just a couple of weeks, walked into class one day, wordlessly stared at all of us for just a moment, before looking away and beginning to quietly cry before running out of the room full sprint. She quit her job that day, and we never heard from her again. There's no joke here. That's just a true story that I thought might be relevant to this situation. Anyway, it's time for us to leave the Lost Woods and head somewhere else. In-game, as Link leaves, his dear childhood friend Saria, knowing that she may never see him again, gives him an ocarina, symbolizing their eternal friendship, hoping that no matter how far apart they are, she can still bring him happiness in some small way, much how he has long done for her. And Link responds by staring at her like a freak while slowly backing away, before breaking into a full sprint and proceeding to throw the ocarina away the moment he finds a slightly shinier one at the bottom of the river. Hyrule Field is the largest area in Ocarina of Time, and believe it or not, this place was considered a technical achievement when Ocarina of Time was released in 1998. And while you'd have to be some kind of a fucking idiot to sprinkle some monsters into an otherwise empty plane and market it as a selling point on a modern console, back then, people were genuinely impressed that Nintendo was able to get this running on the Nintendo 64. Now, despite the size, it doesn't really mean there's a lot for us to work with here, though. We got a river, which provides us with a steady source of fresh water, so that's nice, but other than that, all we have is a few bushes, trees, and peahats, which are giant sets of spinning blades that fly right at you if they catch you in the wrong part of the field. But even if we manage to avoid all the peahats, that doesn't mean we're going to be safe. In fact, they aren't even the biggest threat we have to face here. Certain areas of Ocarina of Time experience an actual day-night cycle. Not sure why we didn't see that in the Lost Woods, but whatever, it's something we have to consider here. A full day lasts only 230 seconds, and then we have to spend the next 80 seconds of nighttime constantly being accosted by the world's goofiest fucking skeletons, which are constantly popping out of the fucking ground like some kind of deranged gopher. Look, these things aren't actually that scary. They actually die with just a few good smacks. But if you think about it, so would we. And while you can usually just kind of walk away from these things without much issue, you eventually are going to need to sleep. And you're not getting that full 8 hours without one of these guys coming up for a little cuddle. Now, I know people are going to say, just go to Long Long Ranch. It's right in the middle of the field, and the baddies don't spawn there. In theory, good idea, but you see, the owner of the ranch and his daughter are off at Hyrule Castle and won't return until Link completes a short quest. So in the meantime, the only guy currently present is Luigi here, and this guy is a fucking dickhead. Normally, that doesn't really matter all that much, but if we're hiding in the farm overnight from the skeletons, we're probably going to run into him sooner or later. He's gonna tell us to piss off, and don't even think about trying to fight him. This guy's armed with a pitchfork and spends 12 hours a day doing physical labor on a farm. My test subject here spends 12 hours a day playing video games on his ass. Holding Luigi is fucking jacked, and when he tells us to leave, we're doing it. So we're going to have to survive out in the field. Or perhaps we can try surviving under the field. Check out this hole in the dirt. Pretty cool, huh? I at least hope you think it's cool, because it's where you're spending the rest of your fucking life. Dive down there, and no matter what time of day it is outside, we're completely safe. And on top of that, we even got a little puddle with a little fish in it. Now, most fish are made of food, and the description of this fish as delicious seems to confirm that to be the case for this one as well. The best part, if we take the fish and leave, there'll be another fish right in the same spot when we come back. How does that work? I don't know, and I don't care. This is free unlimited sashimi, baby. There's people who would pay top dollar for something like this, and you're getting it for free. But if you're some kind of a pussy that thinks this fish we found in a mud pit might not be entirely safe to eat raw or whatever, you can always stick it on the end of a stick from one of these trees and just hold it up to the fire near the entrance of Castletown. Hell, maybe even start a fire yourself from the wood and cook it in the hole. We have options. I mean, just really the two options, but that's still options. And you might say that drinking river water while dodging skeletons on our way back to the fishing hole where we eat guppies out of a puddle is a sad and pathetic existence. But up next, we have Castletown, the capital city of Hyrule. In Ocarina of Time, it's not really a major location, though. You really only run through it on your way to see Princess Zelda. For those of you who don't know who Zelda is, first off, I don't really know why you're here, but I appreciate it all the same. And second, Zelda is a woman who may or may not appear when playing a game in the Legend of Zelda franchise. But in Ocarina of Time, every single time we see her face, something terrible happens. In our first meeting, Zelda is plotting to prevent Gannondorf here from stealing the all-powerful Triforce, which is currently sealed away in a place called the Sacred Realm. Her plan here to prevent Gannondorf from opening the Sacred Realm basically boils down to she's gonna open it first. It goes about as well as you would expect. I think every character in this game has some kind of brain damage, honestly. I feel like everyone is just constantly making the worst decisions humanly possible. But Zelda really takes the fucking cake in this one. The worst part? This somehow isn't the dumbest decision she makes in this game, but we'll get to that when the time comes. Anyway, let's just focus on trying to survive today for now. First off, there's going to be some limitations as to where we can go in Castletown. Believe it or not, you're typically not allowed in the royal castle. If we take a look over here, there's a guy in a blue shirt that actually tried to break into the castle to see Princess Zelda the same way Link did. He's not on a quest to save Hyrule or anything like us, though. He's just a pedophile. But we do learn some valuable information from him. That when he tried to sneak in through the same sewage drain that Link used, he didn't manage to fit through because his grown-ass man body was just too big to fit. So, unless the guards are just gonna let us in, which I don't know why they would, we're trapped outside of the castle. None of these grapevines or streams of water will be available for us. Not that we'll be needing any of that posh-ass sewer water anyway, because we have the good old public fountain right in the middle of town. I mean, you can't really tell it's a fountain in the original game because the camera's inside of it at all times. But if you play the 3DS remake, it's much more obvious that there's running water here. Food, however, is going to be a little bit trickier. Less wild fish and flowers to eat in the middle of the city. But a little known fact about cities is that sometimes you can actually acquire food in exchange for money. Now, I'm sure there's a dedicated food store somewhere in the capital city, probably one of these stalls that all these people are crowding around, but the only actual option available to the player in this game is this potion shop, where our food options are going to be the exact same as Hyrule Field. We got a fish for sale, except now we gotta pay for it. You gotta pay 200 rupees a pop for this thing that we can just find in a mud pit right outside the city limits. I mean, considering money just kind of grows in grass around here, I guess it's probably not that much money, honestly, but it is enough where Link needs a special wallet to hold that many rupees. Although, if you think about it, we're not really carrying as many slingshots and swords and bombs as he is, so I think we could just use our pockets like a normal person. Worst comes to worst, we can just carry a pile of rupees around in our shirts like a child pretending to be pregnant by stuffing a ball up there. I don't care if it looks stupid. I can't afford to have any self-respect. We're in a survival situation, and I'm due any day now. I need to feed my baby. But where are we going to get the money? Now, there is some grass that does drop rubies in town, so, we got a source right here. But I am lazy and want a faster option. Meet the guard in charge of watching these pots all day. Now, you may think that sounds like a stupid job, and he would agree. He hates his job and explicitly asks us to smash these pots just so he can feel some excitement in his life. As an extra bonus, he even lets us keep all the money inside the pots as a reward. What a guy. As long as he's here and these pots are around, we can afford all the fish we need to survive. But this only gets us food and water. We are still homeless. And while I don't feel particularly endangered by the corgis that wander the street at night, it would be nice to have some actual shelter for once. Now, intuitively, there are probably homes that we can live in somewhere in the city, but I don't see any signs for apartments being rented out or anything. So it's hard to really know how many rupees we need in order to rent out a room, but it's pretty safe to assume that most jobs in the city will pay enough to afford rent somewhere. Now, the only place I could find that's actively hiring employees is the Happy Mask shop, and well, they need you to leave the city in order to do that job. And we aren't allowed to do that, are we? As far as I'm aware, no other place is hiring. At least not for now. Because I have a little trick to open up an employment opportunity for ourselves. We're going to go back to the nice jar man who's been helping to feed us, and we're gonna snitch on him. Anonymously, of course. We can't risk ourselves being outed as the guy who's been breaking all the jars. But once we go in for our daily ceramic smashing and don't see him there anymore, we'll know that our plan was a success, and phase 2 can begin, where I will walk up to the captain of the guard and ask for that newly opened position. I could stab someone real good with one of those things. Okay. And just like that, we're employed, baby. I still don't know where our shelter is, but these guards got to be sleeping somewhere. So, I don't know, maybe in one of these houses or in a barracks somewhere. Look, the important thing is we're not homeless anymore. We're going to be living somewhere at least somewhat more comfortable than the cobbled streets getting run over by corgis every night. So best not to spend too much time dwelling on it. Besides, we have other places we need to go. Look at the beautiful mountain. It's a wonderful JPEG. Thank you, Impa. But before Link can go to the big JPEG in the skybox, there's one more location we need to go through first. The sleepy little town of Kakariko Village. Home of the fucking peasantry. There is a well in the middle of town, so easy access to nice, clean, mostly corpse-free water. And unlike the neighboring Hyrule Field, this town seems to be entirely safe after sunset. Look at them. the local homeless, peacefully slumping against his favorite tree in the night. Not a worry in the world. I envy his carefree lifestyle, so I've decided shelter here is optional. All we need is a steady food source. There are no shops in town, only residential buildings. There are cuckoos, of course, but anyone familiar with this game will know they are far more likely to consume us than we are them. I don't know where people in this town are actually getting any food, honestly. Maybe they do a trip out to Castletown or something. It's like a 3-minute walk, but we can't do that. So we're going to need to find an alternative. Well, they do constantly keep spawning in when we lift this rock, so I mean, it's an option. So we can survive in Kakariko, just eating bugs from under rocks and sleeping outside, unless, of course, we decide to become part of society and join the workforce. Now, it's easy to walk into a city and tell yourself that finding a job won't be difficult, but in order to start getting paid, someone's actually going to have to agree to hire us. And most of the people in this town, also appear to be unemployed. The chicken lady just handles chickens she can't eat. The people inside buildings just bitch about me being in their house. There is a Hylian soldier, but I don't see a recruitment office anywhere. And I doubt they need a second gravekeeper for the 20 graves they have in the back of the town here. Which brings us to this fat man maniacally laughing in that homeless guy's bedroom. When you first speak to our jolly gesticulating giant, he'll complain that his current employees are lazy, terrible construction workers, and it is this dissatisfaction with his subordinates that we can exploit. By becoming a brown-nosing little suck-up, we can nod our heads in agreement like we care, endearing ourselves to him before offering our own services to this man, hopefully securing ourselves a job in the process. Now, his employees actually do seem to be working their asses off. They're constantly running around town doing something. I'm not really sure what exactly, but everyone seems to agree that running in these circles all day is getting buildings constructed. So whatever, I can do that too. And as long as I'm faster than at least one of these bloated builders, our job should be secure. But what kind of pay can we expect for all this hard work? I don't really know. It can't be great because the construction workers can all be found sleeping in the same house at night with their boss, who is also in charge of their dinners as well. So everyone here is probably dirt poor. But at the very least, we can at least get ourselves some shelter and whatever food these guys are cooking. Pick your poison. Bust your ass all day just to live and eat with the world's worst boss, or live a more carefree, more free-range life and eat bugs for every meal. Either way, Kakariko Village is entirely and perpetually survivable, at least until the construction crew leaves in 7 years, but we'll get back to that later, because it's time for Death Mountain. And right off the bat, we find these 6-foot wide spiders called Tektites, and they're heading straight for us. Now, I know I said I think I could kill the last 6-foot spider we came across, but these ones are actually fighting back. And I don't think I can win a fair fight against a 6-foot wide spider. So, we can't eat these, at least not for now. Fortunately, they're relatively slow, and we can just kind of walk around them, allowing us to ascend the mountain and eventually reach Goron City. Not that there's any food to really eat in Goron City anyway. I mean, there are the Gorons themselves, but I mean, they're wildly stronger than your average human, and they're made of rocks. And while there is some vegetation growing on Death Mountain, it appears to fucking explode whenever you try to pick it up. And that is exactly what we need in order to survive. At the bottom of Goron City, there is a sealed doorway with a bomb flower on either side. All we have to do is pluck one of these bad boys, drop it, and the doorway is open, revealing a shop that sells bombs that don't explode the moment you touch them. Now, in-game, you need a bomb bag to buy these things, but that's bullshit, and everyone knows it. I'm not some dainty little schoolboy who needs to carry around everything in a tight little sack. I'm a man. I am just going to buy one bomb and hold it until use. If we need a second bomb, I'll come back later. We don't need 20 bombs in reserve at all times like Link has here, like some sort of a deranged psychopath. Anyway, we're going to be using this bomb to blow up the local wildlife. Check one of these bad boys at that bad boy and bam, food for days. And the Tektites, of course, always come back after you kill them, so no need to worry about running out. The hardest part of this whole process is just finding the cash to buy bombs, but you've already learned by now that nature will provide. So with food sorted, all we have to do is find some water on this volcano, which on the surface seems a little bit difficult considering there's no water, but what about under the surface? With a couple of well-placed bombs, we can destroy some obstructing boulders and gain access not only to this cliff, but more importantly, this big-ass hole, in which we have 3 puddles of water constantly being drip-fed by some mysterious source in the ceiling. Now, a drop of water is not a lot of water, but we do have a lot of drops here. So just how many drops are getting dripped? In order to calculate how much water we're receiving, I just kind of stood there and counted as they fell in front of the camera for a while and determined that on average there's about 178 droplets from each one of these sources every minute. Assuming that we receive a steady flow of water at all times, which is a very stupid assumption, but it's what's happening in game, so we're just gonna stick to the scientific process and go with whatever I'm observing here. With 178 drops dripped from every water source every minute, we can expect about 768,960 water droplets every day. And according to the first source I could find on Google, a droplet needs to be about 0.05 milliliters in order to have enough weight to overcome the force of cohesion holding it to the surface of the ceiling. So with a bit of math, we can find that we're getting about 38,448 milliliters of water, or 9.934 gallons every day. Well over the minimum amount we need in order to survive. Hell, if the water droplets were a 1/9 the size, we'd still have enough. Although, I don't know if you've noticed, but there is a cow here. Now, we already have a renewable food source here, so using this cow for its meat is probably not a good use for it, especially when the milk will last us much longer. Cows, however, typically only have a 15 to 20 year lifespan. I was initially worried that this cow would eventually die and its rotting corpse would poison our entire water supply here, but then I came to the sudden realization that cows are living animals and we can just kind of walk it out of the pit. We just gotta coax it into doing so at some point in the next decade, but I mean, I can't imagine that'd be that hard. So as long as we don't fail in doing that, Death Mountain is another surprisingly survivable location, even if we have to live in a dirt hole again. I mean, I guess we could live in Goron City, but I mean, that's just kind of a larger dirt hole if you think about it. But that's enough about Hyrule's overworld for now. It's time to look at our second dungeon, Dodongo's Cavern. Now, I know there's lava everywhere, so it's gonna be fairly hot, but if you've ever headed into the volcano's crater at the top of Death Mountain, you'll already know that in Ocarina of Time, when it's too hot for a human to survive, a literal countdown until Link gets a heat stroke comes up on screen. And I don't see that anywhere here. So it may be a bit toasty and uncomfortable in here, but not lethally so. Food though, where can we get it? Most enemies in the cavern are not edible. This is a rock. This is a robot. This is meat, but it's subject to spontaneous combustion. The best sources of food we got here are these two Lizalfos that we find halfway through the dungeon, and these guys fight back with actual weapons. Now remember, we don't start these survival scenarios with anything other than the clothes on our back, so we're going to be barehanded here. Now, you can find some bombs in the corners of the rooms and in the grass around here, so maybe you'll get lucky and you can blow them both up, but like, good luck with that. But unlike all the other enemies we've looked at so far in the game, these ones don't respawn when they die. Once you kill them, that's all you get, meaning we are going to starve. Assuming you don't die of dehydration first, that is. But because I couldn't find any water here, we're dead in 72 hours tops. Hell, given the heat here, we're probably going to be sweating, meaning we're going to be losing water and dying of dehydration even faster. I really only brought up the Lizalfos because I wanted to show some enemies off that don't respawn. I think it's actually pretty interesting that the developers decided that some enemies should come back after being killed while others shouldn't. And it makes sense if you think about it. There's probably not a ton of lizards with knives running around out there, but if you were to kill some animal in a forest, it's not like there would never be another animal in that forest again. That's probably what the developers were going for. It really helps to make the world feel like a bit more of a living place you're traveling across rather than a video game level you just need to clear out. But we're not here to talk about game design. I mean we are, but just on a much more superficial level. Anyway, we have just one more dungeon this stupid kid needs to go through before his life can get way worse than it already is. And before that, we gotta go through 2 more regions because of the story or whatever. I promise it's important though, because we're gonna learn some important information at Lake Hylia that will affect the future prospects of our survival. Now, obviously, Lake Hylia has a lake, so water seems to be pretty easy to access, but is there enough here to last us a lifetime? Yeah, I don't think we really need to break out the ruler to run calculations here. We will never drink an entire lake. Now, housing exists in Lake Hylia, but there's only 2 structures. A laboratory run by this old scientist, and the fishing hole run by the fishing hole guy. But I wouldn't really call the fishing hole housing. It's just kind of more outside, sectioned off by a small floored area. So the only real shelter available to us is the laboratory, which is already occupied by this old man. Now, I think I could beat up an old man and steal his house in real life, but in a world where wizards and mystical magical powers actually exist, I'm not fucking with Mr. Magic Potions here. You never really know what kind of magical home defense bullshit he could pull on us. So we're gonna be homeless here, but it's not really all that bad. This area is pretty safe and monster free, and we even have a nice freshwater river here feeding the lake if you're too afraid that the lake water's too stagnant and full of creepy crawlies or whatever. Which, I mean, to be fair, it is. This googly-eyed goon right before us is called an Octorok because it is an octopus that shoots rocks. Very creative name, I know. But they're actually pretty interesting because one, you can't eat them. They just kind of hide underwater if you swim up to them. And 2, when they hide underwater, they literally just despawn. You can't see them at all anymore. Which brings up a pretty interesting question that we're going to have to answer. We know intuitively the Octorok must still be there because he reemerges to attack once we're far enough away from him, and other underwater creatures such as the Zora exhibit this same behavior as well, simply disappearing before Link's eyes. So what we're witnessing here is not the actual removal of these beings from the game world, simply the removal of these beings from Link's perception of the game world. They're still here, they're just hiding, and who knows what else lies hidden beneath the surface of this lake. I don't mean like monsters or anything. I'm mostly talking about, like, you know, fish. You think there's food in there? Because there's already a few fish we can see underwater here. So we at least got this one small school, and catching the fish is easy enough too. The fishing hole guy has a fishing rod that we can just kind of borrow for a while. But if we only have this tiny school of fish, that's going to be a problem because these 10 fish are only like 2 days worth of food tops. Now, we do have an alternative option to the fish, but I'd really rather not. Look, worst case scenario is we just feed some of these bugs to the fish every day for a year or so until we have a big enough fish population where we can eat some of them every day without worrying about depleting the whole lake. I am, for my own sake though, going to be assuming that Lake Hylia has more than 10 fish in it and that we simply just can't see them right now because I really don't wanna. But aside from that, there's one extra detail we need to discuss before we head off to Zora's domain. If we take the bridge towards the only tree in this entire region of Hyrule, we run into the notorious tutorial owl who stalks Link everywhere he goes. Today, we're learning about the Zora and their kingdom's separate but equal policy, where all the other races of Hyrule need to live separately from the Zora, and the Zora will despise them all equally. Well, I'm not sure that's a fully accurate description. It's not that the other races aren't allowed to live in Zora's domain, it's that they're not even allowed to set foot there in the first place. The only exception to this rule being messengers from the royal family, and I am not one of those. But just because we aren't allowed in Zora's domain proper doesn't mean we can't camp out in their front yard. Welcome to Zora River. All the water in Hyrule flows from this very river, and all the water in this river flows from under the king's taint. He really hates all the other races in Hyrule. Now, as if the waterfall here to keep the humans out of the domain wasn't enough, they've also blocked the road to Zora's domain with this fence. And then they blocked the road to the fence with a shit ton of boulders. I cannot overemphasize just how much this guy fucking hates all the other races in Hyrule. Now, Link can't get over these boulders, but he is 3 feet tall and stupid. I'm pretty sure I could climb an 8-foot rock easily. And it's not just because I can float. I'm pretty sure any healthy human being could do it too. But, you know, if you can't, we're just going to be starving to death in this tiny little place, so there's not really much more to talk about there. So just to keep things interesting, I'm going to say we can climb over these. If you feel you can't do that, feel free to admit that in the comments section. There is fresh water running through the entire area, of course, so that's good, and a couple of Octoroks, but they are impossible to get a hold of, so we can't eat them. And to make things worse, a river's current is so strong that swimming upstream seems to be entirely impossible, leaving us stranded on this side of the gate. There's no food here either. Well, there's not enough food to survive off of forever, so we need to find some way to cross the river so we can continue upstream. Fortunately, that's where a little trick I like to call video game bullshit comes into play. If you pick up this cuckoo, this one chicken will be able to hold us aloft in air while we hold it, allowing us to just barely jump across the river. Now, there really isn't much over here. We got 5 frogs and 2 water tektite. Food for sure, but I got a brand new treat for everyone. Take the chicken over to this cliff and climb up this ladder, and we can find a special hole in the ground with a fairy fountain. If you haven't played this game before, a fairy fountain is a special fountain that is full of fairies. You're really only supposed to use them as a source of healing, but more importantly for us, the fairies are replaced every time you exit and re-enter the location. And you know what I like to do with things that respawn. Now, in many Zelda games, fairies appear as little people with wings, but the fairies here aren't really like that. They're just like light balls. So we need to determine first whether that ball of light is just an aura around an edible creature, or if these things are just like little magical spirit balls that fly around healing people. Because I don't think we could eat like a magic spirit. Now, in Ocarina of Time, there really isn't an answer to that question. They don't really drop an anatomy lesson on Navi when you first meet her or anything. But Ocarina of Time isn't the only game in the series, is it? In the direct sequel, Majora's Mask, the fairy Tattle says at one point that she has a face, and apparently that things can stick to it. Now, if you see a face here, let me know. But what I think this means is that this ball of light is meant to be an aura surrounding an actual tangible body, and therefore, I can consume them for their nutrients. Now, you may have some quarrels about eating sentient and benevolent beings with human-level intelligence, but you have to consider the fact that makes you a soft bitch. And if you want to survive out here, you gotta learn to be a hard bitch like me. I mean, you could also grab a stick and kill and eat the tektites, but they fight back, and I'm very lazy. So it's the fairy fountain for me in this barely sheltered, lonely river life we're going to be living here. I mean, I guess we have Bean Guy. It's not that lonely. No, I don't want to buy beans. So please stop asking. Anyway, let's go do the whale dungeon. Inside Jabu-Jabu's belly. All right, first off, this is clearly a mouth. Second, we are inside a whale. It is somehow not the worst place to be in the game, but like, I don't know about this one. Also, this is the second dungeon we've been in where it's just inside someone else's mouth. Like that's 2 out of 3 dungeons so far. Actually, 3 out of 3 if you include the dead Dodongo in Dodongo's Cavern. Is this intentional? Like symbolism of our duty to save Hyrule eating away at our childhood innocence or some shit? It really makes you think. Except we don't have time to think, because right off the bat, we have 4 enemies we need to deal with. Now the bubbles, I mean, you can just kind of pop them. Not exactly a threat to anyone with fingers. No, the real issue is the Octoroks. You get anyone near their general area, and they start shooting rocks at you. Our only option to avoid immediate and mortal danger is to just stay away from them. And to make things worse, you can't just run past them into the rest of the whale because the throat is blocked off. You gotta smack the vulva with a slingshot in order to get in, and we don't have a slingshot to use in this whale mouth. Now, the one good thing about getting swallowed whole by a whale is if you look closely, there was a fuck ton of food in here. Just kind of take a bite out of the floor and you got yourself the freshest slice of whale sashimi you ever did done eat. That delicious whale sashimi. Look, we can't afford to be picky when we're trying to survive, all right? You gotta take wins where you can get them. Now then, for fluid, there certainly is some here, but it's a bit yellow, and I'm pretty sure that's where the bubbles are coming from. And we're not going to be starting a fire or anything here in the moist flesh pit, so we're going to be drinking that raw, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be dying. Let's say you can drink this though. How much water we got here? The water is about 24% Link's height, and we can break it down into just like a big rectangle and a few triangles around the edges, which when I measured them all out came to about 45,455,304 cubic centimeters, 12,008 gallons, or 32.89 years of water. Now, there is, of course, a second problem about drinking from this pool of water for 32 years, and that is, I gotta piss. We are stuck in this mouth where everything is just a slope that leads down to our water supply, which means that if it's not already poisoned, we're going to be poisoning it ourselves. That being said, it looks like someone's already pissed in the water here, so I'm gonna be putting down this place as guaranteed death by dehydration. But once Linky Boy clears this dungeon in-game and gets out of this fuck-ass whale, he's got everything he needs in order to open the Sacred Realm and doom Hyrule. And more importantly, he gets engaged to a fish princess who asks us not to tell her father Presumably, because if the king finds out his daughter is dating a fucking knife eater who got his dumbass eaten by Jabu-Jabu, he's going to eat us himself, and this time, he's going to make sure it sticks. It doesn't look like it would be his first time doing that either. But before we can go get that Master Sword, we got like this weird outlier region that happens to be the only optional one for Child Link to go to, so I'm just gonna jam it in here. Gerudo Valley, home of the Gerudo people. I'll get more into them later, but all you need to know for now is that they hate men. Well, they don't hate men. They're actually the horniest group of people I think I've ever seen in a Nintendo game. But men aren't allowed in the valley for whatever reason. If you're a woman unlike me or Link, they might let you in, so let me know how that goes for you. But spoilers for later, I don't see any Hylian woman in their fortress, so I don't think outsiders are typically allowed to stay with them. You're probably stuck out here with the boys. Now there is a freshwater source, and 5 fish, so we got like a day or two worth of food before the starvation begins, but honestly, not much to work with here, at least not on the top of the canyon. If we simply dive off this cliff into the water, there's a small ledge here with not only a Gerudo woman, but a cow as well. A pretty good chunk of meat for us to consume. At least that's what I was going to say until I realized you can't really jump 300 feet into a roaring river and survive. I looked this up, and apparently, after only about 50 to 100 feet, you're more likely to die on impact with the water than to survive it, so I'm going to assume this drop will just kill us, because it almost certainly will. If you figure out how to make a parachute out of rocks and dirt, let me know, but otherwise, we're going to be starving to death here in about a month. But with that, we have finally assessed every single location in Hyrule, at least for now. If you've never played Ocarina of Time before, once you beat all the dungeons as a child, Link opens up the Sacred Realm for Zelda, only to get trapped upon grabbing the Master Sword. There he is frozen for 7 years until he is physically old enough to wield it properly. And in the meantime, Gannondorf just kinda walks through the door we unlocked, takes the Triforce, and conquers Hyrule. Fantastic job, you two. And this conquest leaves it entirely transformed. In order to save Hyrule, Link has to travel through 5 temples to save 5 sages who will help him take Hyrule back from Gannondorf. So now, not only do we have the 5 temples to evaluate, but every single area of Ganondorf's Hyrule as well. Don't worry about me wasting too much time on all those same areas we've done before though. I'll really only be going into details on areas where our survival strategy needs to be adjusted. And what a better place to start off than the final place we saw on our way to pull the Master Sword, Castle Town. So things could be better. All right, the fountain is gone. The shops are gone. The people are still here. Big problem with the Redeads. They are dead. Their flesh is rotting, and we almost certainly cannot eat them. So we're going to need to look elsewhere for food. And the only place we really have access to is the outside of Ganon's castle. The water's gone here as well. The grass is gone. There is a crater full of lava. For some reason, what did Gannondorf do to the earth here? Why does he need a floating castle? And I mean, I don't think we're going to be collecting the 6 sage medallions to get in there ourselves. You kind of got to be chosen by the gods or whatever for that. So we're stuck out here in the lava and dirt. Honestly, I think it's best for us to just go back to the Temple of Time, curl up in the fetal position, and wait until we die of dehydration. At least, it seems relatively safe there compared to everything else. If you leave Castletown, I mean everyone else did, so that's probably the right call. Everything is the exact same out in Hyrule Field. The rivers still have water, the fish hole still has a fish in it. 2 fish now. Hey, little friend. Yep, we can mark this place down as being the same as the original. But where did all the survivors from Castletown go? Well, to our next location, of course. When we were here last time, we managed to eke out a poor, yet respectable living as a member of a construction team, and in the 7 years since then, all of the town's construction projects have been completed, and the construction workers have moved on, so that strategy is out the window. In fact, due to the disaster down the street, Kakariko is experiencing a refugee crisis, and despite the new buildings, both work and housing is in short supply. As a result, large swaths of the town's population just aimlessly sit around in homeless shelters all day. So, we can check shelter off the list. That's all set. You're just gonna sleep in here with the rest of the unemployed. But still, our job is gone. And worse, the well has been drained. So, where are we going to find food? Okay, so it's going to come down to the bugs again. But we still don't have to eat them. See this guy? He buys bugs. Why? More like, why should I care? Because he'll give us 50 rupees per bug, and we'll buy as many bugs as we can give him. And as always, every time we go inside and come back out, more bugs respawn. Don't worry about how, it's just one of those mysterious things no one has an answer to. Like, why is the universe expanding? Or how do tides work? Like, tide comes in, tide goes out. You can't explain that. But what I can explain is that if we sell these bugs 4 times, we get 200 rupees. So what are we buying with these rupees? Well, the push shop is in this town now, so we're buying fish again, baby. Which, very importantly, seem to come with some free water to keep it alive as well. We can even cook the fish and boil the water on the hearth at the homeless shelter for all you picky eaters out there. Now, there is one problem in that Link typically requires a bottle to hold this water with the fish, and per the rules of this video, we aren't spawning in with any bottles like Link does. But, I mean, like, we can just use one of these mop buckets at the homeless shelter. I'm sure that's fine. We're boiling it all anyway, not really a big problem there. So overall, we have maybe a little bit less respect than we would have had 7 years ago, being technically unemployed at all, but this is a comfortable and fairly sustainable existence. I mean, there's still a massive refugee crisis that threatens to destroy the local economy, and if that boy ever stops buying bugs, we're gonna be stuck drinking rainwater and eating them, but still a survivable situation either way. However, I tire of this civilization. It's time for us to head off to our first temple, located in the Lost Woods, with all the stupid kids. We're doing the Kokiri Forest again real quick. For the most part, it's the exact same as before. There is one major difference, however. Instead of 3 little flower sticks for us to eat, there is now a million of them. They are all over the fucking place, and they are much more aggressive. These ones can actually hurt you if you aren't careful. But the thing about over-aggressive plants is that they are fucking plants. These things die if you hit them too hard with a stick. And again, we are in the Lost Woods. Just walk out of the village a bit, grab a stick, and smack these idiots in the head when they stick their necks out for you. This place is almost as easy to survive in as it was 7 years ago. Sure, it's a death trap for all the kids here. It is very dangerous for these children to fight these 6-foot-tall man-eating plants, so they have to stay inside all day. And most tragically, this child can no longer make love to his favorite rock 12 hours a day. But that does not affect us, so we can just kind of ignore all that. Let's just get out of here and check out the Forest Temple. The Forest Temple is the first major dungeon you visit as an adult in this game, and right off the bat, we have a little issue. Inside you, there are 2 wolves. Get them out! I'm going to be honest. I'm not beating 2 wolves in a fight. Let me know in the comment section if you think you can beat a wolf to death with your bare hands, but I am slow and stupid. I fuck things up real easily, and I think it's better just not to take the risk personally. But since they're so slow, we do have the option to just run right by them. And in the next room, we're rewarded for escaping danger with a giant spider, which, as always, doesn't really attack or anything, just kind of presents, so we can just kind of punch it to death if we want. And this is one of those enemies where every time you leave a room and come back, it responds. So, infinite food. All we need to do in order to survive now is find some water, which, believe it or not, is a very easy task here, because right here we have this giant pool of water, and via the scientific process of just kind of eyeballing it, we can determine that there's easily more than enough water here to get us through a lifetime, seeing, just how much bigger this pool is compared to some of the other ones we've been measuring already. But sometimes in life, just because you know how to get to something doesn't mean you actually can, because this big-ass pool of water is locked behind this big-ass block, and the only way to move this thing is to play the Song of Time on the Ocarina of Time, but we cannot do that because we do not have this legendary instrument passed down through the royal family of Hyrule. So I guess we're just going to be stuck in the main room here until we die of dehydration. Trust me, I looked around. We could go into this second room with all these ladders, and there's some enemies in there we could try gnawing on to pass the time, but we're dying here in 72 hours max because someone at Nintendo thought the pinnacle of game design would be to make the player toot their flute before walking through this door. Massive disappointment, honestly. But you know what's even worse than questionable game design? Genocide. Genocide is worse than questionable game design. As a part of his Peace in the Near East plan, Gannondorf has enacted a containment procedure against the Gorons, wherein he contains the entire population to tiny jail cells before feeding them to a fucking dragon. Considering half of our survival strategy on Death Mountain was previously buying bombs from the Gorons and using them to blow up the local wildlife, this is likely to impact our survival chances here. Except, one of the only Gorons that Gannondorf forgot to capture was the shopkeeper. And for some bizarre reason, despite the total depopulation of Goron City and the impending eradication of his people, he's still just running the shop. Kinda bored doing it, buddy. What the fuck? We even still have the cow pit with all that juicy wet falling from the ceiling. Actually, when you think about it, the genocide really doesn't affect us that much at all, does it? So I guess we can afford to just kinda ignore all that and check out the fire temple instead. It is hot. It is very hot. It is very hot in the fire temple. Certainly living up to the name here. Now, we haven't had to deal with this up until now, but in certain super hot areas of Hyrule, such as the fire temple and the area around the fire temple, Link can only survive a limited amount of time without special protective wear. And that exact amount of time is directly related to the number of heart containers he has, with him getting 8 seconds for every heart. But how many heart containers do we have? Well, Link starts with 3 and gets more heart containers by killing giant monsters and consuming their life energy, and I've never done that. Just gonna say I have 3 heart containers and 24 seconds before I die in these superheated rooms, which is not a lot of time. Fortunately for us, however, not everything in the fire temple has a heat timer on it. You can actually sit in some rooms with no protection whatsoever. Most importantly, the very first room of the temple. Very convenient. Now, there are 2 rooms bordering this one, and both are superheated and full of magma, so we can't really leave this place. Not that it really matters. Believe it or not, the fire temple is not the best place in Hyrule to find water. So unless we want to follow Darunia the Goron chief and go get eaten by Vulva Vagina, we're going to have to wait to die of dehydration instead. And I don't know how hot this one room is, but considering all the rooms around it are full of magma, it can't really be that much cooler. Going to assume we're going to be sweating a lot and dying of a heat stroke in much less than 72 hours thanks to the heat. So how about we try somewhere colder instead? Because before we head off to our next temple, we actually have a little mini dungeon we need to check out first. As the name suggests, the ice cavern, it is cold as fuck. Link is visibly freezing, and apparently that is not ideal for your health. Now, the effects of hypothermia can set in under an hour, and the effects of my ADHD in even less time than that, so we need to act fast. Now, I do have one Hail Mary solution that certainly won't work, but it's our only chance of survival. We're not surviving in a room this cold without some kind of a plan. Now, if we just move forward, make it past these freezers that can freeze you solid with one blast of their ice breath, these keys that can freeze you solid with one bump of their ice wings, a giant spinning ice blade, which it doesn't freeze you solid, it just kind of cuts you in half, but at least it's keeping things interesting. After all that, we come across the legendary propane fire of Hyrule, but apparently propane burns cold in Hyrule, as the fire is described as being cool to the touch, so we need to keep moving. But if we keep going just a bit further, we get to fight a wolf to the death. I told you this was going to be a bad idea, but what's the payoff? Well, if we still have enough strength, my plan is basically just to take one of these icicles and stab him to death with it, and then use his body to keep us warm. I was originally going to suggest skinning him to create a coat, then we could actually stay here indefinitely, but I quickly realized we don't have a knife, and even if this ice is sharp and pointy, it is ice. It will melt as soon as we pierce the skin of this corpse, and we can't really wait for the corpse to cool down because we are cooling down ourselves. Our reward for getting past the 1,000,001 things in this cave that can kill you instantly are these boots of iron, and the fact that we get to snuggle with his wolf corpse for a few extra hours until it cools to the point where it can no longer keep us warm. We would be lucky to last one night in this place. That's fine though, because we have better, sexier places to go. After Link gets the iron boots himself, he is able to head off to Lake Hylia, which, despite having less water in the lake and less hair on this man's head, is otherwise identical to how we found it as a child. The only change of significance is that we can now access the water temple. Now, I know a lot of you anime fans are into cat girls, but have you ever considered the following? Fish girls, because I know Nintendo has. Here in the water temple, we find our fiancé Rudo, who has been eagerly awaiting the day Link returns from his stay-in-time prison so that they can finally get married. But before all that hot, nasty fish sex, she needs to help save Zora's domain. So she swims up ahead of us to show us the way to go. And that is the last time Link ever sees his fiancée alive. What's extra crazy is this is not the only time Link has gotten a fish girl fiancé. And what's even crazier than that is this is not the only time his fish girl fiancé dies. It's actually really weird that it happens twice. Like, why do they have to die so soon? They never even get to doink. Why does Link never get to bang the fish? Do you think Nintendo will ever let Link bang a fish? I don't know. I just think about that sometimes. Anyway, in addition to beautiful fish women, I also need food and water in order to survive. Now, I think we got the water covered, so we're 2/3 of the way there already. And there's 2 water tecta here that will respawn every time you leave and re-enter the room. Problem. All of the other rooms here are underwater, and the distance to these rooms is really far away. The only reason Link can even make it is because he has magical clothes that let him breathe underwater. And all the other pockets of air are just a little bit too far away for a human to really make it there before they, drown. So this whole respawning process is going to be a non-starter. We could swim out the front door of the dungeon and then back in by going through like 10 feet of water. That would be really easy actually, but thanks to my arbitrary restrictions on this survival challenge, we are explicitly forbidden from doing exactly the thing that would save us. So we're going to starve to death instead for no good reason, at least after we finish our giant spider meat, that is. So the question is, how long can we live off these bugs? By importing a picture of these jumping Jeremies into Photoshop and counting the pixels as always, I was able to find the dimensions of their bodies fairly easily. Now, the thing about video games is they're a bit more polygonal than the real world. Kind of assume the legs would be more cylindrical in real life and the body would be composed of 2 kind of rounded cones with a flat surface on the area cut out for the face. Not perfectly accurate, but it gets us in the ballpark. But after all this measuring and plugging my formulas together, I came to about 274,641 cubic centimeters of that good hop meat. I have no idea what the nutritional makeup of a Tektite would be, but since they're both big bugs, I decided to look up the caloric value of real world bugs to get an idea. The closest thing I could find was scorpion meat. This honestly wasn't that easy to find for some reason, despite the fact that I know people eat scorpions in real life, but after a little bit of research, I did find an estimate on how many calories are in a scorpion from a 2006 paper on the website called Science Alert. Is that a reputable source? I have no idea, but they did find that there are about 331.55 calories in every 100 grams or 87 cubic centimeters of scorpion. So we're just gonna assume it's the same for these guys, meaning that they contain 1,075,158 calories and weigh about 696 pounds. But at 2,000 calories per day, that should mean that these would last us about 523 days each, or nearly 3 years total. Now there is one little caveat here that might make this irrelevant, being that meat rots, especially in extraordinarily moist places, you know, like the Wada Temple. We can't wait a year to eat this shit. Hell, we probably have like a day, maybe 2. I only did all that measuring because I mean, all the infinite food sources in the other levels was just boring me. And hell, maybe meat in the Zelda universe doesn't rot after all. This fucking steak has been in the back of Link's pocket for the last 6 years after all, so it's definitely a possibility. But let's stick to the rules of the real world for now, and say that being generous, we got 2 days to eat the meat after we kill the spider, which works out to an extra 4 days before we can never eat again. But just because we have only 4 days to eat doesn't mean we only get 4 extra days to live, because I have a little trick called being a fat ass. Yeah, so have you ever just had one of those days where you just sit around and eat an entire box of pizza and a box of breadsticks and some Pringles and then spend the rest of the day trying not to throw up from overeating? We're going to be doing that, but with spiders, and we're going to be doing it 4 days in a row. Now, between some research I did online and my own personal experience, the human body can really only absorb 3 to 4 times the amount of calories it normally needs in a day. Highballing our estimate a bit, if we eat about 4 times our daily caloric needs every day for 4 days, we can then take about 16 days worth of nutrients and energy and store it in ourselves as body fat, allowing us to go an extra 16 days before we starve to death. Well, I mean, I guess we technically just start starving a few hours after we run out of food, and we're just gonna spend an extra 16 days starving to death. But hey, you know, Actually, I don't even know. That sounds awful. Maybe we should just drown ourselves. Starving to death actually sounds like a terrible way to go out. Just takes so long, you know? But with the water temple dealt with, it's time to revisit Zora's domain, home of the Zora people, and more importantly, the Zora women. Ah, fuck. Gannondorf froze them up. God fucking damn it. First he came for the Hylians, and I did not speak out because I was not a Hylian. Then he came for the Kokiri, and I did not speak out because I was not a Kokiri. Then he came for the Goron, and I did not speak out because I was not a Goron. Then when he came for the fish fuckers, there was no one left to speak out for me. Also, the Zora probably aren't doing well under there either. Anyway, there's nothing of use for us here in Zora's domain. It's all just ice, and we already have plenty of water on the river outside. And things are pretty much the same out here. The only change that'll actually affect us here is there's more Octoroks than before, but, you know, the fairy fountain's still there, so as long as we can dodge all the boulders getting shot at our heads, we should be fine to just live out our days sipping down cold river water and eating tiny little people just like before. Been there, done that. Let's go somewhere new instead, like Kakariko Village. But, okay, hear me out. This time, we go in the well. For some reason, when the windmill in this town spins too fast, the entire town loses its primary water supply. Weird design choice, but hey, at least we got a new mini dungeon from it. Now, I've heard a lot of people call this the scariest place in Ocarina of Time, but it's not so bad. If you stand right here in this room, there's no monsters or anything we really need to worry about. There is this giant flaming skull, but he doesn't really seem to care about Link. He just flies in circles all day for no reason. So as long as he's staying out of our way, he's less of a threat and more of a pet. I'm gonna name him Cement. Now, as you would expect from a drained well, there's a lot of water down here. Downside, there was also blood and corpses everywhere, which is typically not something you'd want to have in your water supply because it'll poison you. But you have to remember, people have been drinking this shit for years, and they're mostly fine. So I think we can actually drink this. Plus, there's fire all over the place if you really want to boil the water first. You do just got to get by the Gibdo, which normally force Link to stand in place when they scream before grabbing and consuming him. I always thought the Redan and Gibdo were using magic to make Link stay in place, but in the final escape sequence from Ganon's castle, while Link is frozen by a Redan, Zelda just kinda walks on by, entirely unaffected, which I think actually reveals that Link is just a scaredy little bitch. And we too can just ignore them if we want. Just place that water on the fire and come back in 20 minutes. Look, I used to work in a nursing home. You think I haven't seen a corpse before? If anything, a dementia patient is far scarier when they're alive. So, how much water do we got here? Let's start with this hole in the ground. Fortunately for us, it's a pretty simple rectangular prism made up of evenly sized bricks. So we can just measure how tall and wide each of these bricks are, and then count the number of bricks along the edges of the pit to determine its dimensions. Using our good old Photoshop rulers, we can determine that these bricks are nearly 2/3 Link's height, and their width is about 0.8335 Links long, or 86.68 centimeters wide by 69.33 centimeters tall. This hole is 9 by 4 bricks wide, and then just 4 bricks tall. But importantly, the water height is only 3.7 bricks tall. This little pool has a total volume of 69,394,362 cubic centimeters, 18,332 gallons of water, or just over 50 years worth at a gallon per day. Not bad at all. But if you look closely, we have a tunnel at the bottom of our little pool, meaning there's even more to measure. Editors, note, I am a fucking moron. I found this fountain while I was getting B-roll and suddenly remembered that all water in this well is being freshly supplied in a steady, unending stream, meaning all that measuring I just did was for nothing. This is the second time I've done this in this very same video, but I hope you enjoyed all that time I spent finding the volume of a fucking rectangle. Remember to like and subscribe for more content like this. Now, food is going to be a bit harder. At first, when I saw these dead hands and read that they were infinite, I thought to myself, infinite hands? Well, that's just infinite food, baby. Problem. The door locks when you walk into his room, and you gotta kill him to get out, eliminating our food source and the whole reason we came here in the first place. Also, this might be like a undead corpse situation, in which case he wouldn't be edible anyway. I couldn't really tell. Fortunately, we got a Skulltula right at the entrance, and yes, this one does respawn every time you walk too far away from it. A bit boring, but honestly, the fact that we found any organic material here that isn't just rotting meat is kind of a miracle. And while I do think that living in a zombie pit is kind of a worse situation than just being homeless up in Kakariko, it is technically survivable, and at the very least, we have cement to keep us company. You want a real shitty place to live? Well, don't you worry, because Kakariko somehow has a second zombie pit in it. I don't really know why. I guess it makes sense to keep them all in the same place, but you know, you didn't really need to build the second town of the kingdom on top of them. Seems like bad civil engineering to me, but whatever. Let's just talk about the Shadow Temple. This is the entrance, and ironically, you're not allowed in the Shadow Temple without a light. More specifically, you need to light every single one of these torches to open up that door. Normally, you have to use this magic spell Link gets from this woman with too many ponytails. Let me know in the comments section if you can do this, I guess, but I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to be stuck in this room with no food or water for the rest of my life. The title screen for the Shadow Temple doesn't actually show up until you get through the door. So to keep this interesting, let's say that this is where the temple actually starts and move forward from there just to see if it makes a difference. So we're going to be a bit short on space. Normally you need the hook shot to get across this gap, and you can't really jump across that too easily, so we're gonna dehydrate if we stay here. But that is still boring, so let's say hypothetically we can make this jump. We're just a better jumper than Mr. 5'-1" over here. Now, it isn't immediately obvious if there's anything for us here. You do need the Eye of Truth to see where we want to go, but technically, it's optional. You can just rub against the walls until we find the way forward. That brings us to this dead hand, which I don't think we're killing that, and if we do, we're certainly not eating it, and that's really all there is here. Unless you can figure out a way to cross this even larger pit, we are going to be dying of dehydration here. Cheating past the first two obstacles really just didn't do much for us, did it? But there's still one more temple we need to check out. And to get there, we're finally going to be exploring the Gerudo Valley. Now, just like before, survival here is going to vary heavily depending on your own personal circumstances. But men like Link and myself are generally forbidden for being in this place. We actually will get thrown into jail just for being men here. On the plus side though, if the women want to throw me in jail, that means they're going to have to touch me first, which is pretty exciting to imagine. But to give some further context to the situation we're in and why there's no men here, it turns out the Gerudo women can only give birth to females. Coincidentally, Gannondorf is actually a Gerudo himself, meaning that Gannondorf must have been born a woman. You can actually see his top surgery scars in one of the sequels. Look at him, proudly displaying that symbol of the struggles he had to overcome in order to become the man he knew he was always meant to be. A true trans icon. And after the operation, the Gerudo decided to acknowledge this transition by banishing him from the valley forever, just like all the other men. True allies through and through. Just not to us, though. In Ocarina of Time, Link and the 4 male carpenters from earlier are all held prisoner here as punishment for the crime of cock. Now, Link can only escape because he has this hook shot and can grab onto this ledge. We do not have that, and more importantly, I don't think we would want to escape even if we could, because a big part of keeping prisoners is keeping the prisoners alive. The incarcerated carpenters have been imprisoned for some time by the time Link has shown up to rescue them, and they're really no worse for wear, confirming that the Gerudo have been giving them food and water at the very least. Additionally, just because they don't want men trespassing around them doesn't mean the Gerudo don't want men. Again, the Gerudo are the horniest of Hyrule's races by far. That is to say, in order to maximize our chances of surviving our imprisonment, we're going to have to seduce our captors. I can't speak for any of you, but one look at these fins and, well, I think I'll have them eating out of the palm of my hands. Now, the fact that there's no other men in this fortress already, other than the prisoners, is probably a sign that they won't be keeping me around forever. After all men are fated to age, and even looks as good as mine will one day be lost. The women will lose interest, and I'll be befallen by the worst fate imaginable, as I am kicked out of the fortress and lose the survival challenge by leaving the area. I mean, I guess we can still starve out in the front here like we did 7 years ago, but I'll probably want to kill myself after being rejected by every single woman in my life. Naturally, it's impossible to say exactly when they'll get bored of me, but I'd say I got at least a good 20 years left in me. Again, your personal experience may vary. Also, if you're a woman, good luck. I have no idea where they're getting their food or water from in the desert. Speaking of which, once Link beats up enough women, they figure if he's gonna keep breaking out of prison and running all over the place, they might as well stop having to fight him every time, and just give him permission to pass through to the greater Gerudo Desert. Thanks, girls. Now, the desert appears to be a rather dry place, but we actually have a giant quicksand river right at the start of the area. And the funny thing about quicksand is that it's actually mostly water. So we should be able to suck some of that out and keep ourselves hydrated. Maybe just strain it through our shirts into our mouths. And not only that, but because it's mixed with sand, quicksand is actually extraordinarily dense, and humans will just float on top of it if you ever end up in it. I mean, that's not what happens to Link here, but he also carries around a pair of lead boots in his backpack, so that may or may not be related. And regardless of whether we'll sink or not, quicksand is so incredibly thick that crossing this river is pretty much going to be impossible for us. So we're going to be stuck on this side of the desert. Now, there's not really much here, especially in the way of shelter. And the problem with that is that there's a massive sandstorm going on, and sandstorms are actually lethal to human beings. Now, you're typically not out in one long enough for it to be an issue, but during a dust storm, the air is actually full of dust. And the problem with having dust in the air is that's usually the stuff you fill your lungs with. This dust can accumulate inside of you, and has been known to cause a variety of medical conditions, pneumonia being the most common and most serious one that people have to deal with in real life where their exposure is limited. But in particularly severe instances, once the dust has sufficiently coated the mucous membrane of your lungs, throat, and nose, asphyxiation has been known to occur. Now, the exact method and time to death is going to depend heavily on how much dust we can prevent from getting into our lungs, but we can't stay out here forever. And considering issues arise when people just spend a few hours out in dust storms, it's safe to say that we're not going to be able to wait a month here for us to starve to death. I'd say even under a best case scenario, we're not going to make it more than a couple of days here. But that's enough dying in the desert for now, or at least this part of it, because we have one final temple we need to take a look at now. Located at the far end of the Gerudo Desert stands the Spirit Temple. The Spirit Temple is unique because it is the only temple you get to visit as both a child and an adult in this game. As a child, when we enter, we can go left and meet Nabulu, the Gerudo chief who is looking to steal something on the other side of this tiny little hole. And for some reason, she's pretending she can't fit through that fucking gaper and decides to have us rob the temple for her. As the last temple in this game, you're obviously expected to have a wide arsenal of tools available to you at this point. But without bringing any tools with us into the dungeon, the furthest we could conceivably make it is to the third room here, and that's assuming we can kill this skeleton with our bare hands. And it's not like there's much to eat in any of these rooms. We could maybe grab and eat a few of these bats, but bats are not large animals. We're talking like one day's worth of food between all of them, tops. And without any further resources for us to find in this temple, that can only lead to one outcome. We are going to need to consume Naburu. But how much Naburu do we have here? Naburu stands at about 46.59% taller than Link, or 152 centimeters, 1 inch taller than adult Link. Using that information, we can use this BMI chart I found on Google Images to estimate her weight. She's pretty thin, but the Gerudo lead a very active lifestyle, so she's also likely very muscular. Muscle is far more dense than fat, so I'll split the difference and say she's likely an average healthy weight for a woman of her height, or around 115 pounds. In women, about 14% of their body mass is bones, and on an athletic woman with a visible abdominal wall such as hers, body fat typically makes up just about 15% of her weight. Muscle is around 33%, with the remaining 38% of her body weight being composed of her blood and organs. Nutritional info on eating humans was, for some reason, much easier to find than scorpions. I guess it just comes up more often somehow. Her various non-fat and muscle viscera have a surprisingly low calorie count at just around 8,200 kilocalories. Her 37.95 pounds of muscle mass come in at around 26,565 calories, and as you might expect, despite making up the smallest part of her edible mass by weight, her 17.25 pounds of fat should net us by far the most calories, at a nice hefty 62,100. And by a sheer stroke of luck, the human body also contains all the nutrients that a human body needs in order to survive. So, no need to worry about any nutritional deficits here. So, we have a total of 96,865 calories, or 48 days worth of food if we scrape every last bit of meat off those bones, which normally I would say is impossible. We can eat maybe a quarter of that before it begins to rot, if we're lucky. But we are in a desert, meaning that it is very dry, and if we can cut some of the meat thin enough using the sword from that skeleton, we could leave it out to dry and make some girl jerky, pushing the expiration date on this stuff out considerably. This, of course, means that we're losing all the hydration present in the meat, which brings us to the most important point of all this. we have no water. Even if we drink every drop of blood in this girl, at her weight, she only has a gallon tops. And blood isn't exactly a great substitute for water either. It'll hydrate us, but just a gallon's gonna keep us going for less than a day. We'll be dead of dehydration in less than 4. And that's assuming we even manage to kill this muscular woman who spends her entire life horseback riding and sword fighting. I have spent my whole life sitting in office chairs and playing video games. I mean, maybe I can sneak up behind her and get her by surprise, but honestly, I don't think that someone of her skill set is likely to be bested by me. Now, returning to the Spirit Temple as an adult, there is sadly neither water nor women to consume, at least not at the entrance. If we get into the core of the temple, there's not 1, but 3 women we could theoretically use to prolong our suffering, but without the silver gauntlets to push aside the stone blocking the way. That is but a pipe dream for the determined and the deranged. We will surely be dying of dehydration at the end of 72 hours tops. Also, this has nothing to do with actual survival, but upon completing the temple and saving Nabooru, she imparts to Link the knowledge that if she had known that Link would grow up to be so handsome, she would have kept her promise to him. I'm not sure what she's implying, but I believe she was going to groom Link. So you don't really need to feel too bad about eating her. Anyway, with the Spirit Temple fully evaluated, we have at long last finished every single temple in the game. And with every single Sage Medallion collected, Link returns to the Temple of Time, where Zelda at long last reveals herself to us. 200 feet away from where Gannondorf lives. It goes about as well as you would expect. Fun fact, when Gannondorf actually got the Triforce at the halfway point of the game, he only got a third of it, with the 2 other thirds going to the most brave person in Hyrule and the most wise person in Hyrule. The latter of which, somehow being the person who allowed this whole mess to start in the first place. And if Wisdom Girl here was truly the best choice, this whole kingdom must be dumb as fucking bricks. I would ask how these idiots manage to keep themselves alive, but I already know the answer is that most of them simply do not. And yet somehow, the worst is yet to come. But before I tell you how Hyrule can get even more doomed than this, we have one last place we need to take a look at, Ganon's Castle. Now, being home to Gannondorf, you would think that this place would be pretty dangerous to hang around in. And you would be correct, there's things that would kill you almost everywhere you go. The keyword being almost. The front door here is pretty safe, along with this entire room with the energy barrier as well. At least when Link gets here, that is. I mean, I imagine Gannondorf, the evil genocidal king who lives here, might sometimes walk to the front door of his house, but he can also fly, so maybe he just leaves and flies back in through a window on the top floor like it's a fucking Minecraft base or something. In which case, we would never have to deal with him down here. So let's just pretend that isn't the dumbest fucking assumption anyone's ever made and try to figure out how we're gonna live here. Now, we actually do have some pretty easy water. I mean, it's not great, but we can go into the water seal room and take some of these constantly regrowing icicles, bring them out back to the central room, and warm them up to turn them back into that good drink sauce. It's not as easy as it sounds, though. There's freezies you gotta watch out for, but they're so goddamn slow. You can just kind of walk by them, and by the time they actually start blowing their ice breath, you'll be out of range. So as long as you're careful, water is all set. We just need to find food, which, I mean, there's one wolf in the forest temple room if you think you can take that guy on, but there's no other organic material we have other than that. And again, I am not 1v1ing a werewolf. I think they're like a magical animals kept here by Gannondorf to keep Link out. Or maybe he's more like Ganondorf's pet dog, and Gannondorf just comes down a couple times a day and walks him around the lava moat or something. But if that's the case, then Gannondorf is going to be coming downstairs to find my homeless ass in his living room. And I do not feel that Gannondorf has a particularly liberal position when it comes to homelessness. I have seen the Hyrulean housing situation, and his policy towards homing the unhoused is not good. So in the best case scenario, we're dying of starvation, and in the worst case scenario, we're going to be getting transformed into a bloodstain on the floor in the first 12 hours. But with that, we're done. That's every single area in the Ocarina of Time ranked on how survivable they are. Honestly, Hyrule is far more survivable than some of the other games I've looked at. I think it really goes to show just how much thought was put into the world design here. These games just have so many details surrounding the lives of the people who actually live here. It's not really a surprise that everything even close to a settlement is just fully inhabitable. Not that it matters in the long run, though. Remember how I said Zelda was gonna fuck it all up? Yeah, well, at the end of Ocarina of Time, Gannondorf is sealed away, vowing revenge when the seal eventually breaks, at which point Zelda, in her infinite wisdom, sends Link to another fucking timeline where he can live out his childhood that he missed out on because of the time prison. This is a problem because there is now no legendary hero chosen by the gods in this timeline, so when Gannondorf does eventually break out, no one can stop him, and the gods literally have to resort to drowning the entire kingdom to prevent him from destroying the whole world, leading to the ocean we see in the Wind Waker. Wisdom Girl here somehow managed to make an even bigger cataclysm right after we finished cleaning up the last one she made. Pathetic. But that's 100 years away. So we'll leave all these little islands for some other time. Remember to smack every thumb and sub button under this video so that the robots that run this site think it's a good one to show other people. And let me know in the comments if you think that any of these levels should have been ranked differently, or if there's any games you want to see in the future. And a very special thank you to all of my supporters on Patreon. Your kindness and generosity is unparalleled, and I love you all. If you'd like your name at the end of the next video, you can support me for just $1 on Patreon. If we get enough people to throw a fistful of pennies at me every month, I can finally quit my stupid job in finance and fulfill my true life goal of yapping about video games online full time. Alright, bye bye.